For years, Count Dracula has become synonymous with the Halloween season. Various books and movies have paid tribute to such an iconic, seemingly unkillable vampire. But in reality, this fictionalized character was actually based on a very real person. Vlad III was the son of Vlad Dracul, which translated to Vlad the Dragon in medieval Romanian, a title given to him after becoming a member of the Order of the Dragon, a militant fraternity founded by the King of Hungary at the time, Sigismund of Luxembourg. His son would later be nicknamed Dragula or Dracula, which was Slavonic at the time to mean son of Dracul or the dragon. He was born in 1431 in the small Saxon town of Sighisoara, which was in the Kingdom of Hungary at the time, though it is now known as Transylvania. His father lived in a 3-story house, and his mother is believed to have been Vlad II's second wife, Princess Knazna of Moldavia. The Order of the Dragon was dedicated to stopping the Ottoman Empire from advancing into Europe. In 1436, Vlad II's half-brother Alexander I Oudea passed away, causing him to make the decision to seize Wallachia in Romania. He didn't support the Ottomans invading Transylvania, but he was then invited by the Ottoman Sultan Murad II to Gallipoli in March of 1442 to discuss his loyalty. However, this turned out to be a trap, and he, Vlad III, and his other son Radu were all captured. Vlad II was actually released on the condition that his sons remained behind in a fortress, which he accepted. Their father was convinced that his children were going to be murdered for the sake of Christian peace, but in actuality, neither were harmed. Although there were some reports of them being tortured and subjected to watching the Ottomans murder their enemies, most eyewitness accounts claim that they were tutored in science, philosophy and the arts, with Vlad III even becoming a skilled horseman and warrior during this time. On the outside, his father didn't support the Ottoman invasion of Transylvania, and it was soon revealed to the public that he was now the ruler of Wallachia. This unfortunately led to his murder in the swamps near Baltini in 1447, while his eldest son Mircea was also tortured, blinded, and then buried alive. With their leader now dead, it was in November that year when Regent Governor of Hungary, John Hunyadi, decided to invade Wallachia and made Vladislav II, also known as Dan II, the new ruler, who just so happened to be Vlad II's cousin. Though being the heir, Vlad III was also a possible claimant for his title as well. Historian Michael Kritobulosh believed that with Vlad II now dead, the Ottoman Sultan allowed his sons to leave imprisonment. It was in September 1448 when Vladislav II and John Hunyadi collectively launched a campaign against the Ottoman Empire. By the beginning of October, Vlad broke into Wallachia himself and discovered that the Ottomans had captured the fortress of Giurgiu on the Danube. It was between the 17th and 18th when Hunyadi's army faced defeat in the Battle of Kosovo, and his deputy Nicholas Vizaknai urged Vlad to meet him in Transylvania, possibly to form an alliance, but he refused. It was on December the 7th, 1448, when Vlad was forced to flee Wallachia to the Ottoman Empire. Quote, "We bring you the news that Nicholas Vizaknai writes to us and asks us to be so kind as to come to him until John Hunyadi returns from the war. We are unable to do this because an emissary from Nicopolis came to us and said with great certainty that Murad II had defeated Hunyadi. If we come to Vizaknai now, the Ottomans could come and kill both of you and us. Therefore we ask you to have patience until we see what has happened to Hunyadi. If he returns from the war, we will meet him and we will make peace with him. But if you will be our enemies now, and if something happens, you still have to answer for it before God." End quote. At this point, Vlad initially settled in Edirne within the Ottoman Empire, before moving over to Moldavia. Bogdan II was on the throne thanks to the support of John Hunyadi, but in October 1451 he was murdered by Peter III Aron. It was now when Bogdan's son Stephen fled to Transylvania, along with Vlad, in an attempt to get help by Hunyadi, and on November the 20th he ended up conducting a 3-year truce with the Ottoman Empire. On February the 6th, 1452, Vlad reportedly wanted to settle in Brasov, but Hunyadi absolutely forbade the town from providing him any shelter. This led to Vlad returning to Moldavia, and the next few years of his life remain a mystery. What is known is that he did return to Hungary at least before the 4th of July in 1456, as on that particular day Hunyadi informed the townsfolk of Brasov that he had now provided Vlad with the task of defending the Transylvanian border. At some point between April and August 1456, Vlad invaded Wallachia with the additional support from Hungary, but this is when Vladislav II died during battle. On September the 10th, Vlad sent a letter to the townsfolk of Brasov, promising to protect them from an Ottoman invasion, but also requesting assistance if they tried to take over Wallachia. Quote, "When a man or a prince is strong and powerful, he can make peace as he wants to, but when he is weak, a stronger one will come and do what he wants to him." End quote. There were many reports that during the start of Vlad's reign he executed hundreds of thousands, beginning a purge against those responsible for the death of his brother and father, as well as anyone who he suspected to have been plotting against him. It was on August the 11th, 1456 when John Hunyadi passed away, and his eldest son Ladislaw Hunyadi now became Captain General of Hungary. However, he didn't like Vlad and accused him of having no intention of remaining faithful to the king. He ordered for the townsfolk of Brasov to support Vladislav II's brother Dan III in their efforts to fight against Vlad. Despite this, on March the 16th, 1457, Ladislaus V of Hungary had Ladislaw Hunyadi executed. After his death, his mother Elizabeth Szilágyi and her brother Michael began to stir up a rebellion against the king. Meanwhile, Vlad wanted to take advantage of the Hungarian Civil War and helped Stephen, son of Bogdan II, to seize Moldavia in 1457. Vlad broke into Transylvania and plundered villages around Brasov and Sibiu, and there were also reports of him actively carrying men, women and children from a Saxon village over to Wallachia to have them all impaled. It was now likely out of fear when Vlad's representatives managed to negotiate peace between Michael Szilágyi and the Saxons, and the town of Brasov agreed to expel Dan III from their land completely. On January the 24th, 1458, Ladislaw Hunyadi's younger brother, Matthias Corvinus, was elected the King of Hungary, and on March the 3rd he ordered the town of Sibiu to keep peace with Vlad. However, Michael Szilágyi allowed the Buya Michael, who was the official of Vladislav II of Wallachia, to settle in Transylvania, but Vlad then had him killed instead. By May, he asked Brasov to send over some craftsmen to Wallachia, but by this point his relationship with the Saxons had greatly been tarnished. He supposedly forbade them from entering Wallachia, and forced them to sell all of their goods to Wallachian merchants at border fairs, but they refused to comply. The Saxons instead decided to confiscate the steel that a Wallachian merchant had purchased in Brasov without repaying him. However, as soon as Vlad heard of this, he ransacked and tortured some Saxon merchants. He reportedly had them and their children impaled and then burned alive. The cruel stories of Vlad, now known as the Impaler, would only continue over the years. Basarab Leota would write to the councillors of Brasov and Tarabase, quote, "You know that King Matthias has sent me, and when I came to Tarabase, the officials and councillors of Brasov and the old men of Tarabase cried to us with broken hearts about the things which Dracula, our enemy, did. How he did not remain faithful to our lord, the king, and had sided with the Ottomans. He captured all the merchants of Brasov and Tarabase who had gone in peace to Wallachia and took all their wealth, but he was not satisfied only with the wealth of these people, but he imprisoned them and impaled them, 41 in all. Nor were these people enough. He became even more evil and gathered 300 boys from Brasov and Tarabase that he found in Wallachia. Of course, he impaled some and burned others." End quote. At some point before April the 22nd, 1460, Dan III actually managed to break into Wallachia, but Vlad the Impaler managed to defeat and execute him. Vlad invaded southern Transylvania and destroyed several suburbs of Brasov, ordering the impalement of all of the men and women that he had captured. He demanded the expulsion or punishment of all of the Wallachian refugees before peace was finally restored on July the 26th, 1460, with Vlad referring to the locals as his brothers and friends. However, it would only continue on August the 24th, when he invaded the region around Amlas and Fagarash, punishing anyone who showed any support of Dan III. It was reported that Vlad refused to pay homage to the Sultan, but it's unclear when exactly this took place, though it was speculated to have lasted for 3 years. Allegedly, Vlad only decided to turn against the Ottoman Empire once the Sultan was on a long expedition in Trebizond in 1461. It was at this point that the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II gave orders to capture Vlad, but once he got wind of this, he captured and executed his acquaintances, Hamza, Bey of Nicopolis, and Thomas Katabolinos. He then gave orders to take over the fortress of Giurgiu before invading the Ottoman Empire, devastating several villages along the Danube. During this invasion, around 23,884 Turkish and Bulgarians were murdered. At this point, Vlad sought military assistance from Corvinus, claiming to have broken peace with the Sultan for the honour of the king and the Holy Crown of Hungary and, quote, for the preservation of Christianity and the strengthening of the Catholic faith, end quote. He would write in 1462, quote, I have killed peasants, men and women, old and young, who lived at Oblokitsa and Novoselo, where the Danube flows into the sea. We killed 23,884 Turks, without counting those whom we burned in homes, or the Turks whose heads were cut by our soldiers. Thus, your highness, you must know that I have broken the peace, end quote. In total, it's believed that Vlad was responsible for the deaths of around 80,000 people through various different means. Once learning of the invasion, Mehmed II managed to raise an army of 150,000. It's been suggested that the Sultan wanted to take over Wallachia, though others are convinced he just wanted to change who was in charge. On June the 4th, 1462, under the Sultan's command, the Ottoman army crossed the Danube at Nikopol, Bulgaria, and Vlad the Impaler was completely outnumbered, being forced to retreat towards Targovista. It was between June the 16th and 17th when Vlad broke into the Ottoman camp and attempted to assassinate the Sultan, but failed and had to retreat once again. It was that same month when Mehmed entered Targovista and found the entire town completely deserted, except for a barrage of dead bodies. Before them laid thousands of carcasses of those executed by Vlad, all impaled on stakes. The sight was so disturbing that the Sultan couldn't bear to see the decaying bodies being picked apart by crows any longer, and retreated to Constantinople. Quote, the Sultan's army entered into the area of the impalements, which was 17 stades long and 7 stades wide. There were large stakes there on which, as it was said, about 20,000 men, women and children had been spitted. Quite a sight for the Turks and the Sultan himself. The Sultan was seized with amazement and said that it was not possible to deprive of his country a man who had done such great deeds, who had such a diabolical understanding of how to govern his realm and its people, and he said that a man who had done such things was worth much. The rest of the Turks were dumbfounded when they saw a multitude of men on the stakes. There were infants too affixed to their mothers on the stakes, and birds had made their nests in their entrails. End quote. For years, rumours circulated detailing the sheer cruelty of Vlad the Impaler, with many describing him as, quote, a man of unheard cruelty and justice, and a demented psychopath, a sadist, a gruesome murderer, a masochist. End quote. Some stories range from him dipping his bread into the blood of his impaled victims, while Meister singer Michael Berheim wrote a poem about the man, claiming that he had impaled 2 monks to help them reach heaven, as well as ordering a donkey to be impaled as a punishment for it mourning the death of its master. Despite these stories, Vlad did actually marry twice. The first one is unclear and was possibly the illegitimate daughter of John Hunyadi, whereas the second was the cousin of Matthias Corvinus, Justina Szilágyi. Sebastian Munster wrote, quote, "Turkish messengers came to Vlad to pay respects but refused to take off their turbans according to the ancient custom, whereupon he strengthened their custom by nailing their turbans to their heads with 3 spikes so they could not take them off." End quote. It's also widely believed that he suffered from a rare condition known as hemolacria, in which his tears could have actually been made up of partial blood. However, the main consensus is that due to his death being written about in several novels after the fact, these stories may have been exaggerated or even completely fictionalized by the Saxons, or even in order to increase book sales. Quote, "Vlad had a big copper cauldron built and put a lid made of wood with holes in it on top. He put the people in the cauldron and put their heads in the holes and fastened them there. Then he filled it with water and set a fire under it and let the people cry their eyes out until they were boiled to death. And then he invented frightening, terrible, unheard of tortures. He ordered that women be impaled together with their suckling babies on the same stake. The babies fought for their lives at their mother's breasts until they died. Then he had the women's breasts cut off and put the babies inside head first. Thus he had them impaled together." End quote. There were also stories of a golden cup at a fountain in which nobody would dare to steal, as Vlad, quote, "hated stealing so violently that anybody who caused any evil or robbery did not live long." End quote. Another theory, however, is that Vlad actually encouraged these rumours himself in an attempt to spread fear to gain himself more power and intimidation within the Wallachian government. Regardless, it was at this point when he fled to Chilia, which is now Kilia in Ukraine, leaving behind an army of 6,000 soldiers to fight against the Sultan. But expectedly, they were defeated by the Ottomans. The Ottoman army soon left Wallachia, but Vlad's brother remained in the Baragan plain, and even sent some messengers over to the Wallachians warning them that the Sultan may choose to invade again. However, over the next few months, Vlad managed to defeat his own brother and the Ottoman army, but several Wallachians abandoned Vlad in favour of his sibling, leading to the former retreating to the Carpathian Mountains, in hopes that Matthias Corvinus could help him regain power. It was in 1462 when Vlad had his first son, named Mirna, and in November Matthias travelled to Transylvania, but he didn't want to go to war with the Ottoman Empire and tried to instead negotiate a deal with Vlad to no avail, leading to the Impaler himself finally getting captured near Rukar. On November the 7th, some letters supposedly from Vlad were written, claiming that he had now joined forces with the Sultan army against Hungary in the agreement that they would return him to his throne. However, most historians believe that these letters were forged by Matthias himself to try to justify the capture. Quote, "The style of writing, the rhetoric of meek submission, hardly compatible with what we know of Dracula's character, clumsy wording and poor Latin are all evidence that the letters could not be written on Vlad's order." End quote. Regardless, he was imprisoned in the city of Belgrade, which is now Alba Iulia in Romania, before being taken to Visegrad, though there is no documentation of his time here. Allegedly though, during his time in prison, Vlad reportedly caught rats and cut them up into pieces, or even stuck them on small pieces of wood as he was unable to forget his wickedness. Vlad the Impaler was imprisoned for 14 years. In the summer of 1475, Stephen III of Moldavia requested Matthias to have Vlad sent to Wallachia against Basarab Laiota, who had since submitted himself to the Ottomans. He wanted to secure Wallachia with a ruler who had once been an enemy of theirs. Another story, however, is that Vlad was only released once he converted to Catholicism. However, Matthias did not help Vlad regain the throne, and he instead settled in Pest. However, one day a group of soldiers broke into his home chasing a thief who had attempted to hide there. Vlad was so outraged that he immediately had their commander executed. By June 1475, he relocated back to Transylvania, but he truly wanted to settle in Sibiu, sending away his associates to try to arrange a house for him. On September the 21st, Corvinus ordered the town to provide Vlad with 200 golden florins to find a home. but by October he left Transylvania to instead head to Buda in Hungary. He ended up buying a house in Pécs, which would later be known as Dracula Háza, which is translated as Dracula's house in Hungarian. In January of 1476, John Pongratz of Dengeleg urged for the people of Brasov to send the support to Vlad, but Corvinus then sent the Impaler as well as Serbian Vuk Grgorevic to fight against the Ottomans in Bosnia. Between February and March of 1476, they managed to capture Srebrenica and take over some fortresses. Vlad mass impaled several Turkish soldiers and continued to massacre civilians, destroying Srebrenica, Tuzla and Zvornik. On July the 26th, 1476, Mehmed II invaded Moldavia and defeated Stephen III in the Battle of Vala Alba, before Stephen Bathory and Vlad the Impaler entered Moldavia, and forced the Sultan to lift the siege of the fortress at Târgu Neamț by the end of August. On September the 6th, Matthias ordered for the Transylvanian Saxons to support Bathory's plan, while Vlad decided to stay in Brasov, and he confirmed the commercial privileges of the local townsfolk on October the 7th. It was on November the 8th when Bathory's forces managed to capture Targovista, and on the 16th, Stephen of Moldavia and Vlad confirmed their alliance, having occupied Bucharest and forced Basarab Leota to seek refuge within the Ottoman Empire. Vlad informed the Brasov merchants of their victory, and urged them to return to Wallachia before he was crowned at some point before November the 26th. By December 1476, Basarab returned to Wallachia with the support of the Ottoman army. It was reported that Vlad's 2,000 soldiers were cornered and destroyed by the Turkish near Snagov, and it was here when Vlad the Impaler died in battle, and his retinue would also be massacred. Vlad had a tendency to disguise himself as a Turkish soldier, so one report is that he did this during the battle and was accidentally killed by a member of his own troop, though this remains unconfirmed. Reportedly, the Ottomans cut Vlad's corpse into pieces and removed his head, before sending it off to Mehmed II, where it was then placed on a high stake in Constantinople on display. It's unclear where the rest of his body was buried, though locals believed it was in the marshes of Snagov, discovered by monks from the nearby monastery. In 1486, Vlad's unnamed second son was tragically killed, and it was also reported that he had a third, named Vlad Dracula, but the details remain uncertain. It wasn't until 1515 when Wallachia was finally defeated by the Ottomans, and the long war was thankfully over. In 1897, the first ever book depicting Vlad the Impaler as a vampire was written by Bram Stoker, based on Transylvanian superstition. However, it's been reported that Stoker knew very little about Vlad, and it may not have even been based on the man at all. The book does borrow the name and some information on Wallachia, but it's possible to have been a coincidence, and the fictional character had incorrectly been linked to the very real man over the years. It was in 1933 when the monastery was actually excavated by Dinu V. Rossetti to hopefully recover the remains of Dracula himself, but nothing was found. Quote, "Under the tombstone attributed to Vlad, there was no tomb, only many bones and jaws of horses." End quote. Historian Konstantin Razacevici believes that he was most likely buried in the first church of the Komana monastery, which had been established by Vlad and was nearby to the battlefield in which he died. But regardless, Dracula's castle continues to remain a frequent visiting spot for tourists around the world to this day. But the true extent of his origins, characteristics, crimes, and final resting place? Well, this is Halloween, so all we can do is continue seeking answers.